All right, I finally got around to recording. Well, I'm about to record part two and part three. I think I'll put them both into one video due to the fact that I just noticed that part three is only about 5 pages long. So, anyways, we'll go on to this, and also I'm hoping that I will be pausing at a certain time when we get to a certain individual here, and then I can go off to the to a website and we can take a look at that person a little bit. But anyways, here we go. For the Arends translation nutrition, the ATA articles from German newspapers translated by William Arends for the InterLiveStream 128-129 Part 2. Since Livestream 129 is coming up in a few days. Translators note, here are reports from Berlin's latest news from August 31st and September 1st of 1917. Both have reports from the higher headquarters. They are printed in bold type. The August 31st excerpts include a report of the resignation of the entire Polish government that was operating on land controlled by the Central Powers, a short paraphrase on how the peace proposal of the Pope was faring with the Entente, and an article concerning Lloyd George's proposal to ask the colonized peoples of Africa by which colonial power would they prefer to be controlled. Berlin's latest news, Wednesday, August 29th, 1917, evening edition. A successful counterattack near Friesenberg. WTB, the higher headquarters, 29th of August, official. Western Theater of War. Because of the influence of the stormy, rainy weather, the artillery activity stayed within moderate limits. A number of reconnaissance advances brought back prisoners and loot as prizes. Army Group of Crown Prince Ruprecht. In Flanders, during the evening, there was a revived artillery battle between Langemarck and Hollebeke. Our counterattack threw the English troops back from the salient that they had gained northeast of Friesenberg. The army group of the German Crown Prince. In front of Verdun, there was heavy artillery battles only on the east bank of the Meuse between Beaumont and Damleux. Army group of Duke Albrecht. In recompense for the shelling of Thiancourt by the French, Rovien-aux-Prés and Pont-à-Mousson were brought under long-range fire. Eastern Theater of War. Russian positions in the Haute-Saale assaulted. Front of the General Field Marshal Prince Leopold von Bayern, Bavaria. No large clash of forces to report. The front of Archduke Joseph. On both sides of the Otus Valley, there were assaults by both Silesian and Austro-Hungarian troops, particularly on the high points and meadows northerly from Grozeski in heavy counterattacks. This resulted in taking more than 600 prisoners. Against the mountain front between Kesavan and Putanatal, the Romanians advanced on many positions, but without achieving any success. New success along the middle of the Sareth River. Its Romanian name is Siret. On the mountain range west of the Sareth River, after a preparatory artillery fire, Prussian, Bavarian, Saxon, and Mecklenburger battalions took the village of Monclui in a house-to-house battle. The beaten enemy was unrelentingly pressed back from many positions on both sides of the Susitsa River valley back to the northwest. The impulsive advance smashed a Russian-Romanian counterattack. The enemy gave up over 1,000 prisoners, 3 artillery pieces, and 50 machine guns. East of the train line, Foksani-Ajudal, there was lively artillery fire. In Macedonia, the artillery fire has been much heavier in these last few days, especially between Bardaran, the Dorjan Lake. The combat of the advanced units of the Bulgarians on the east slope of the Planina Ridge was successful. The first quartermaster, General Ludendorff. The resignation of the entire Polish Council of State from a dispatch of the Łódź newspaper that was printed in the Berlin local advertiser. The full Council of State of the Kingdom of Poland has asked to be relieved of its duties. An official statement about this news has not been made available. Still, this is not a surprising development of these recent days if one understands the real course of events. A step in this direction has been expected from the speeches that have been made in the past weeks and months. The Krakow News reported the cause of this resignation was because of the orders of the General Governor von Biesler that the Polish Corps of Volunteers, militia, be taken out of the Polish armed forces and be placed instead with the Austro-Hungarian army. The reply to the peace note of the Pope by the Entente. A short article concerning the response of the Entente powers of France, England, and Italy, as well as the United States, reprinted that those countries were awaiting a final reply from the Central Powers, especially Germany, which is coming up, by the way, this week. In the high diplomatic circles of the Vatican, it was hoped that the peace negotiations would be ready to begin in the autumn, which was doubted in the diplomatic circles of the Entente. England and our German colonies. A recent proposal of Lloyd George was that the indigenous people of the German colonies should decide of themselves whether or not they would want to have Germany remain as their colonial power. The English have given the Anti-Slavery Society the reason to concern themselves with this question at their London meeting. This gave an opponent of Lloyd George, Charles Burton, the chance to express roughly the following. We English must be pleased that we are to be seen as hypocrites when we would justify our annexation of the German colonies through this choice that we would give to this indigenous population. Are we willing to be prepared to take up a vote of the original inhabitants of Egypt or India? Good question. The sincerity of the words of the Englishman and how he expressed that opinion was emphasized by the agreement shown to it by our correspondent of political economy. Mr. Lloyd George meant for his proposal not to be taken seriously. He knows himself that the German native African population find the German colonization cultural methods to be more acceptable and serviceable than that of the English, and from what I know, way more than the Belgians. But don't take my word for it. The foreign subjects of the English do not participate in any inspirational or creative work and moral lifestyles. Rather than the English give them only purely English goals, the better to take advantage of them, and they intentionally set the example of their own low cultural values as a way to make their natives easier to control. While the English want to portray themselves as the liberators of the German native population rescued from the German forced labor, this sounds like something that should be decided because of the fact that Great Britain not only had many thousands of their own colored subjects pressed into conscripted military service, and they also, for their own self-interest purposes, let the colored subjects of Germany to bleed and to die while they are being forced to serve the English army. Translator's note. Besides the report from the higher headquarters, these articles include reports from the war at sea, which we're about to talk about, Captain Rose, later in a minute here. One of which is a look back at the exploits of the U-53 Captain Rose in 1916 and his navigational abilities that allowed him to cross the Atlantic Ocean unaccompanied by any other ship. Berlin's latest news, Saturday, September 1st, 1917, evening edition. French and Serbian attacks thrown back. WTB, the higher headquarters, 1st of September, official. Western Theater of War, Army Group of Crown Prince Ruprecht. In Flanders, the heavy artillery fire. Battle continued in Dunen and both sides of Ypres, with the exception of advanced patrols there, has been on infantry activity. In Artois, after calm days, there was lively fire from La Bassée Canal up to the southern bank of the Scarpe in the evening. Army Group of the German Crown Prince. Near the farmstead of Hurtebise on the Chemin des Dames, after a heavy artillery barrage, the French attacked. The territory thus taken by the enemy was won back through our counterattack. Several places in the trenches were fiercely contested throughout the night. A number of prisoners were taken into our hands. Advances by the enemy on Württemberg and south of Corbeny were shattered with heavy losses. At Verdun, the battle rages on day after day. The enemy is now increasing his artillery fire again. This activity is continuous in several sectors. The army group of Duke Albrecht, an undertaking of Bavarian assault troops, had complete success. Besides suffering bloody losses, other French had been taken prisoner. Eastern Theater of War, front of Prince Leopold, on the Danube, near Illert, and further by Smorgon, in Baranovici, there was combat activity despite having more unfavorable weather conditions than earlier. North of the train line, Koval-Luke, our recon teams made good the placement of our mortar and artillery fire in the trenches of the enemy. Those who survived to be made prisoner had found shelter in those trenches. Near Tarnopol and Hufeton, Russian patrol units were contacted in close quarters. Army Group Mackensen. In the mountains northwest of Foxani, the German troops threw the Romanians out of a toughly defended high position. Miranini on the Lower Sereth, the German and Bulgarian assault troops stormed the Russian positions. These troops held this occupation for some time and returned with a great number of prisoners. The Macedonian front. In the Cerna elbow, an Italian battalion near Paralovo attacked German troops that threw the enemy back and took more prisoners. Around Drobjobji, more Serbian attacks were shattered west of the Vardar. The French advanced to the positions of the Bulgarians. And that's the end of part 2. Hold your horses because we're about to go and take a look at Captain Rose. All right, and this is Hans Rose, the person. Hold on, I'm just going to take a look. You guys can't see, but it's what William Arends had written in the translator's note, which said, besides the report from the higher headquarters, these articles include reports from the war at sea, one of which is a look back at the exploits of the U-53 Captain Rose in 1916. And that's what you guys are seeing right now. So let's take a look quickly. And I'll put this in the sources and links. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger for you guys. There we go. And it's uboat.net. We've been here before. But anyways, it just shows you here Hans Rose and how good he is. Was 81 ships sunk with a total of 220,000, nearly 221,000 gross registered tons. He also sunk a warship, and there he lived to 1969. Holy smokes! Wow, I didn't know that. So there you go. If you can just take a look, I'll put him later on in the whatever. But wait until you see all the ships he did. There you go. I'll put it in a little bit bigger so that way, you know, to see the rest of the other stuff. And we'll just go there and look at all that. And see, you know, like I said, 1916 was his little bit of the exploits where it started with the U-53. And there we go. Maybe we'll go take a look at U-53. What do you think? Look at all that. My goodness. Impressive. Anyways, let's go and take a look at U-53. And there we are. It was ordered in 1914. It was laid down in 1915. How long did it last? When did it fate? It was surrendered on the 1st of December, 1918, and was broken up at Swansea in 1918. Interesting. And there was another one in World War II. All right. I'm going to hit pause so we can go to part 3. All right. And here we are for part 3. Like I said, well, actually, it's only 3 pages, so it's a quickie. And here we are. Translator's note. Here are the 2 reports about U-boat operation from the Berlin's latest news of September 1st, 1917. 48,000 tons sunk in WTB, Berlin, 31st August, official. One of our undersea boats, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Rose, has done something new on the west coast of England. 7 steamers with 48,000 gross registered tons were sunk and included the armed English steamer Athena, loaded with goods and perhaps livestock, Boniface, Kenmore, Durango, the transport Verde, as well as 2 large 4-masted steamers that were shot out of the midst of a heavy convoy, the Chief of the Staff of the Admiralty to the Navy. Captain Lieutenant Rose is the same naval officer who, in October 1916, sailed around Scotland and then, after a 17-day voyage, surfaced in U-53 in the American harbor of Newport. This maritime performance excited those that were made aware of it in the United States and the rest of the world, because everyone felt that it was impossible for an unaccompanied U-boat to make an Atlantic crossing alone without the assistance of a ship on the ocean surface. I'm sure we must have been talking about this back in the day on the live streams. I'm sure of it. Like, you know, in the bit of the week that was, I'm sure of it. The captain, Lieutenant Rose, has become well known not only for this performance, but rather for his U-boat bringing back provisions, materials, and other items on its return to Germany. This he accomplished going back and forth 2 times along the same stretch of water, and at the same time proved to be a great success in combat engagements as well. The U.S. Navy had believed that such a crossing being done twice was not possible to do, such that the Committee of the Navy in the American Congress held a session in February 1917, where technical experts gave testimony that U-53 on these supply and replenishment missions could not have crossed the ocean unaccompanied by any support ship. This disbelief of the Americans on the actual performance of U-53 is ever the more understandable when we see that these same U.S. Navy personnel and the American naval authorities must hold on to this inflexible position because their American submarines can only operate for 10 days at sea. And that's the end of that. And I'm going to zip it back to the very top so at least we see something half decent. And I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you again, William Arends. All right, off we